I asked Hurst when he came in if he wanted to play the piano, and he said yes. And he said he would like for us to sing America. Most members we've had in really a long time, and I know it's the first time in several months that our accountants all over there have joined us. So welcome everyone, and welcome to our fest. And Joan Wagner will do the guest president introduction and more than a Rotary minute.
We have a lot of guests today. And our tradition here at the club is that you will stand and I will introduce each one and you will remain standing and we'll applaud at the end. So there's 5 of them coming. Kim Montoya is a guest of Joan Wagner. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Kim.
Jackie Lightcap is a guest of Joan Wagner. She went outside. We'll tell her later. Sandra Johnson is a guest of Carol Jordan. Hey, Sandra. And Lisa Taylor is a guest of Carol Jordan. Hi, Lisa. And Brandon Kenny is a guest of Matt Charback. Hi, Brandon. Would you give him a hand? Well, the Rotary Minute for today is really more like a suffrage minute. So if you will notice, can you get closer to the light? I'm not sure it's on. Is it on? Okay, we're going to do it this way. It's more like a suffrage minute today, but I'm going to talk just briefly about Rotary. Rotary was founded in February 23rd, 1905, when Paul Harris called a Rotary meeting. Most of us know that. In 1912, Kansas women got the right to vote in the Kansas Constitution. How many of you knew that? If you looked at our exhibit here, which is sponsored by the League of Women Voters, it gives you a timeline of what happened with suffrage from way before Rotary was founded all the way up to 1920. In August of 1920, the 19th Amendment passed, thanks to Tennessee being the 36th state. And you can see the panel over here that talks about the final fight. That's when Tennessee put it over. On May the 4th, 1987, the Supreme Court of the United States said Rotary could no longer deny membership to women. That's a long time, right? And in 1988, I became the first woman to join this club. I'm always interested in history, and I am particularly interested in what has happened to women over the last 100 years. And the exhibit that you see before you is developed by the League of Women Voters and a committee, an exhibit committee, which I was fortunate to chair, that included historians from Washburn, Fort Hays, KU, and our speaker today, Pat Michaelis, was also part of that. Our own Rotary member, Carol Bradbury, stand up Carol, is the designer for the exhibit. And thanks to her, we have pretty pictures, nice colors, and things that work as we carry it around. I thought you might be interested to know that right now we have secured 51 different locations for the exhibit. in 28 cities. And I have a promise that we can go to Southwest Kansas, and we will add to that Liberal, Garden City, and Dodge City in the near future. The point of all of this is civic engagement. And I am grateful to the Topeka Capital Journal for a lovely editorial this morning that talks about getting women involved, even to run for office. So we have a list of people up here that, on one of the panels, that are notable women who have run for higher office that we ought to pay attention to. I do want to thank Washburn University, the Federal Home Loan Bank, Cox Communication, the Kansas Health Foundation, Humanities Kansas, and a host of others, individuals and foundations who have helped to fund this exhibit. So when you visit it, take your glasses because the print may be a little small. Take your camera and your phone because it's got a lot of QR codes that you can read, and it will give you more information. There are a lot of ways for this to be interactive. And if you are not going to take your camera and you don't need your glasses and you just want to write your thoughts, we have a low-tech option for you to leave your thoughts about the exhibit, and it's on sticky notes at the end. But the point of the exhibit is, what will you do with your vote? We're trying to promote voting in 2020 in Kansas by the League of Women Voters. So with that, that was the mostly Rotary, mostly suffrage minute. And I do have one more announcement, and Joni's coming up. The Kansas Oral History Project, and there are several of us, David Heineman, myself, Raymond Powers, and others who are involved. Tomorrow at noon, there is a program at the old Supreme Court chamber at the state capitol. It's up on the 3rd floor, and we'll be talking about the 17 different oral histories that we've done. And David, they've all been videotaped, and David has put together 5 video clips that we will be able to share with you, as well as some insights by some of them. So I would invite you to that free program tomorrow at noon. Joni, thank you for the extra time.
Good stuff. Now, the last time we did that, she took my notes. I know that she did. These are my notes. Okay. The cup money for this month is Midland Care Connections resources for the Senior Resource Center. And we have a lot of things in the process and planning, so please pay attention. The Rotary Youth Leadership Academy, which is held in at KU, May 31st through June 40th. Applications are, and the process has now begun. If you have youth who will be sophomores, juniors, or seniors in high school, I strongly encourage you to have them apply and participate. It is a 5-day program for high school kids from all over the state to learn about leadership. The acronym is RILA, and applications are to be submitted by April 1st to Lee Morris. Right now he's in Puerto Rico, but he'll be back before then. We have 3 scholarships through the club for students to participate, but there are additional space for other youth if you wish to have them activities. We also will be having fireside chats. The planning is still in the making, so think about if you would like to have a chat at your home or business. We're planning on having those February and March, and you'll hear more about them next week. It's a great opportunity to learn more about some of your fellow Rotarians on a small group basis, but also to provide input on how you think the club is going and what you would like to see the club doing. Lastly, we will be having a fundraiser. Last year we did not have an event. 2 years prior to that, we had the Freedom Festival, and we thought we needed to relook at how we have fundraisers. And so this year we will be having a trivia night, and it will be at the Topeka Civic Theater, April 1st. Now, how many of you have been to a trivia event? Now, look enthused, excited about it. That's great. So you will be asked to get a team together. Now, those of you who have no interest in competing in trivia, we have jobs for you too. So everyone will be able to participate in this fun event. And I'm calling it a fun F-U-N raiser. So it'll be an opportunity for us to educate the community regarding Rotary and the wide variety of activities that we do. It will be an opportunity for us to raise money and hopefully to recruit members, especially those younger. So file that in the back of your mind. April 1st is the date for it, and it'll be at the Civic Theater. And I think that pretty much is all of the announcements and things we have going on. First, we'll be awarding Francine Hines Scholarship.
Thank you, President Joni. Many of us knew Francine Hines. She was a member of this club for many years. She was a Belgian native who was an American citizen, something she was extremely proud of. She felt that it was our obligation always to vote in every election. That was something that citizenship awards us, and we should not take it lightly. I have an interesting little anecdote before I present this scholarship about women in Rotary. Francine, of course, was a member of this club for many years, and she told me she'd been to Nice, France, to visit her brother, who was a Rotarian in Nice. That's not shabby. And she went with him to the meeting, and they said, oh, they were sorry, but at that meeting, women were not coming in. So she proceeded with her indignant expression, said, and I'm never going back. So that served them right. I'm so pleased to present this scholarship. I'm talking about Francine Hines because this scholarship is named after Francine. Francine worked tirelessly for Rotarian scholars. She worked with the Ambassadorial Scholarship Program. She worked with the International House, and Kylie Zhang is here from the International House at Washburn, who helps coordinate these. We always have. Okay. We always have. For years. So I've been in Rotary 43 years, and we've always, in the 43 years I've been in Rotary, we've always had international scholars at Washburn, and the club funds this scholarship. And I'm so pleased to have Christian Paez with us today, who is our recipient of today's Rotary Scholarship. Christian is from Paraguay, South America. He is majoring in entrepreneurship and innovation at Washburn University with a minor in psychology. He will tell you just a little bit about himself. He really is a business and soccer club advocate at Washburn, and I'm going to present to Christian a check for $1,000 from our club as a Washburn Rotary Scholar. Christian.
Hello everyone. First of all, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you for the scholarship. And yes, as he mentioned, I'm Christian Paez. I'm from a small country in South America, from Paraguay. Very small country and very beautiful. Very friendly people over there. And yeah, I've been here since August 2017, and I'm planning to graduate here at Washburn University. Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Congratulations, Christian. We're happy for you, and we look forward to maybe having you visit our club from time to time. If you'd like to, you'll always be welcome on Thursday night. We have a coin here that is part of Rotary International for you to have, and on that coin is what we call the Rotary 4-way test. That's a test that we give to ourselves, all of our activities, our business, our daily life, and how we act in the community. So please read that, memorize that, and if you'd like to pass it on to someone else, you're welcome to do that too. So, thanks again. Joe.
So since we're telling Rotary stories, Roger and I were in Cusco, Peru. And when we're on our international travels, we do try to get to Rotary meetings. However, in Cusco, the meeting that we were able to make was a woman's only meeting. And the club has their flag. Thank you very much. And with that, Marie Pico will introduce our speaker.
Thank you. Patricia Michaelis earned an undergraduate degree from Kansas Wesleyan University and a PhD in American History from the University of Kansas. Her dissertation explored the development of passenger services on U.S. commercial airlines from 1925 to 1930. Pat joined the staff of the Kansas State Historical Society here in Topeka in 1977 as an archivist, serving in various positions during her tenure. She was involved in the development of the Kansas Memory, which is a website that has wonderful resources, so I would encourage you to look at it. The Kansas State Historical Society digital portal. It contains over 590,000 images and averages over 20,000 users per month. So we want to up that number. In 2015, she retired as the State Archivist and Director of the State Archives Division at the Kansas State Historical Society. She writes a quarterly history column for the Lawrence Business Magazine, and she is a native of Russell, Kansas. So please welcome Patricia Michaelis.
Thank you. I've conned Joan into advancing my slides for me because I decided I couldn't hold the mic and move my pages at the same time as well as advancing the slides. So, the title of this presentation is Voices for Women's Suffrage in Kansas. In 1854, when Kansas Territory was organized, women had the same legal rights as convicts, idiots, imbeciles, and Native Americans. Essentially, women had no legal rights, including not being able to vote. Women in Kansas achieved the right to vote in incremental steps. First in school board elections, municipal elections, and finally state and federal elections. Numerous campaigns, some successful and some not, were undertaken, culminating in a winning campaign in 1912. Many people, male and female, were involved in these efforts. Today I will share some information about these various campaigns to secure equal rights for women. One of the first organized efforts to promote suffrage for women in Kansas was undertaken by the Monica Women's Rights Association in Lynn County. It had male and female members, due to 25 cents. It was founded on February 2nd of 1858. Their first activity was to write a constitution. It was presented on February 13th and adopted at that same meeting. The preamble to the Monica Constitution eloquently states their mission and outlines the rights women did not have. Because woman is constituted of body and mind and has all the common wants of the one and the natural powers of the other. Because she is a social being and has all the relations of life to sustain, which belong to an associated condition of existence. And because she is a progressive being, ever outgrowing the past and demanding a higher and greater future. Or in other words, because she is a human being, and as such is endowed by her Creator with a full measure of human rights, whether educational, social, or political. The preamble also listed some of the rights that women lacked. They were unable to attend college and other educational institutions, thus depriving women of intellectual improvement. They were unable to participate in the most lucrative professions in the mechanics arts, so that she was unable to accumulate wealth. She was governed by laws that she had no voice in making, that deprived her of ownership of property and gave even her daily earnings to others. She was forced to appear in courts to answer for crimes against laws to which she had not given her assent, and where she could neither sit as judge or juror or counsel. One of the resolutions adopted at that meeting was, Kansas cannot be truly free while the words white or male are found within the limits of her Constitution. During the Kansas territorial period, many of the supporters of suffrage were also abolitionists, as that declaration illustrates. Most meetings had lectures by one of the members on various aspects of women's rights. In the spring of 1859, Clarina Nichols, who had lectured in New England on Kansas becoming a free state and was a settler in territorial Kansas, wrote the Monica Association expressing her support for women's rights and her belief that someone should advocate for them at the Constitutional Convention. On May 25, 1860, the minutes of the association state that they would employ Mrs. Nichols to lecture on women's rights in Kansas. As a result, she gave talks in various locations throughout the territory. She also attended the Wyandotte Constitutional Convention as an observer. Serena Irene Howard Nichols was born in Vermont in 1810. She attended district school and one term at a private academy. In 1830, she married Justin Carpenter, and they had 3 children. They were divorced in 1843, a not very common occurrence in that question. Clarine then married George Nichols that same year, and they had 1 son. George owned the Windham County Democrat, and shortly after their marriage, he became seriously ill. Clarina took over editorial control of the newspaper, including publishing content supporting women's rights. Mrs. Nichols became well known for her support of women's rights by helping secure the passage of a law by the Vermont legislature giving women the right to inherit, own, and bequeath property. With her 2 older sons, Clarina emigrated to Kansas Territory in 1854 under the auspices of the New England Immigrant Aid Company, and she settled in Lawrence. Her husband and youngest son came later. In March of 1857, she moved to Quindaro in Wyandotte County, where she served as the associate editor of the Quindaro Chindoan. Clarina used the newspaper again to advocate for women's rights and the free state cause. The territorial legislature authorized a constitutional convention for the summer of 1859. Of course, Mrs. Nichols wasn't a member of the convention, but as indicated earlier, she lobbied the delegates on women's rights. In July of 1859, she presented petitions that supported women's rights and that demanded equal civil and legal rights for women. The delegates invited her to attend their deliberations and assigned her a permanent seat. She attended every session, and local accounts also reported that she frequently brought her knitting. Through her efforts and those of like-minded delegates, the Wyandotte Constitution, under which Kansas entered the Union, contained language for equal educational privileges in all institutions of learning controlled by the state, equal rights to the formation and conduct of common schools, an equal right for the mothers with the fathers to custody and control of their mutual offspring, and the right of the wife to hold and accumulate property and sue and be sued.
The first Kansas legislature passed a bill authorizing women to vote in school elections. This was the first step in achieving voting rights for women in Kansas. Because of the Civil War, the next major push for women's suffrage didn't occur until 1867. The Kansas legislature passed a constitutional amendment to strike white from the laws regarding voting. Samuel Newett Wood secured another constitutional amendment to eliminate male from the determination of those eligible to vote. Mr. Wood called a suffrage convention which met in Topeka on April 2nd, 1867. Wood was born in 1825 in Mount Gilead, Ohio. His parents were Quakers and supported peace, temperance, and anti-slavery movements, including being active in the Underground Railroad. During the 1867 campaign, Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Olympia Brown, nationally known suffragettes, toured the state advocating for votes for women. When Anthony and Stanton spoke in Topeka in September of 1867, John Ritchie, one of the founders of Topeka, introduced them. Mary Jane Ritchie called a meeting to organize the Women's Suffrage Association of Topeka in November of 1867 to be held in her home. It was reported that 14 out of 20 Kansas newspapers supported the cause. Prominent Kansans advocating for votes for women included Charles Robinson, S.N. Wood, Lieutenant Governor Root, John Ritchie, B.R. Anthony, Susan's younger brother who published a newspaper in Leavenworth, S.J. Crawford, and the two state senators, Edmund Ross and Samuel Clark Pomeroy. In spite of all the support, both amendments were defeated. The amendment to strike white from the Constitution received 10,000 out of 30,000 votes, and the amendment to strike male only 9,000. Opponents of one or both of the amendments worked to defeat them, often using alarmist techniques or misinformation. After this defeat, efforts to secure women's suffrage were not revived until 1884, when the Kansas Women's Suffrage Association was organized. At a special session of the legislature in 1886, a bill allowing women to vote in municipal elections was introduced, but not considered. In 1887, the Women's Christian Temperance Union joined forces with the Suffrage Association. The issue was highlighted in Kansas in October when the American Women's Suffrage Association held its annual meeting in Topeka. A number of national leaders, some of whom had participated in the 1867 campaign, attended the convention. Susan Anthony, Lucy Stone, Henry Blackwell, Julia Ward Howe, and Reverend Annie Shaw were among those present. The municipal suffrage bill passed both houses and was signed by Governor John A. Martin into law on February 15, 1887. It stated that in any election for school or city officers, or for the purpose of authorizing the issuance of any bonds for school purposes, the right of any citizen to vote shall not be denied or abridged on account of sex. The State Equal Suffrage Association and the WCTU launched campaigns to encourage women in the state to take advantage of their new right to vote and impact issues in their communities. Speakers made numerous addresses all over the state and worked with sympathetic newspaper editors to publish appeals for women to vote. It was estimated that 3/4 of the Republican newspapers in the state supported suffrage. The WCTU and the Kansas Equal Suffrage Association published 50,000 copies of a flyer titled "What Voters Can Do," an address to the women of Kansas. Because of the involvement of the WCTU, issues related to prohibition were part of this document. Some examples include: do you not wish to have all dram shops, gambling dens, and houses of prostitution closed in your city? Do you not wish to have your schools in the most competent hands and your schoolhouses made wholesome places for your children? And this is one of my favorites. Do you not wish to have livestock kept from running your streets, breaking in your walks, and invading your gardens? It concluded with the statement: then use your newly acquired power. By the new law passed this winter, women in cities are voters. Newspapers across the state provided accounts of the first election in which women could vote for city officers.
Topeka newspapers provided conflicting accounts. The one was quoting an article from the Chicago Tribune. On April 7th, the Topeka Journal commented on the article that was published in the Tribune. The article was not only called for, but inexcusable. The greater part of the article is such that we prefer not to publish it. We clip the following extracts. Here in Topeka, the ladies, women, are in one of the most tempestuous teapots they have ever helped to brew. A very interesting meeting at which the writer was permitted to be present was held at the residence of Mrs. S.N. Wood. The ladies, women, some 14 in all, who gathered there were known as the Topeka Auxiliary Branch of the Equal Suffrage Association of Kansas. Mrs. Wood, the hostess, is a sweet-faced little woman with a soft voice and big brown eyes. The other women, with one exception, were hammered brass. Same day, the Topeka Commonwealth published an account that was probably a more accurate description of the election day. Please take note that the percentage of the female vote for the Republican ticket was much larger than that of the male vote for the ticket. It is sweet to dwell in a state where women can vote and do vote. The eyes of the nation were turned toward Kansas yesterday to learn how the women conducted themselves at the polls. As usual, Kansas women behaved admirably, and their male protectors had no reason whatever to be ashamed of them. A goodly number of ladies have gone to the polls and voted. We hear of no homes disrupted, of no insults having been offered, of no unladylike performances, of no verification of the hundreds of ills predicted by croakers. The babies have been properly cared for with meals. The meals have been furnished regularly. Every household duty has been performed satisfactorily, and the ceaseless round of domestic care goes on in their accustomed channel. Let us have peace. One of the election outcomes included that Susanna Medora Salter was elected the first female mayor of a city in the United States. 5 women were elected to the city council in Syracuse, Kansas. 2 women were elected to the school board in Parsons. In 1889, Baldwin had a female mayor and 5 female city council members. In the same year, Cottonwood Falls also had a female mayor and 5 city council members. This trend continued. In 1899, President McKinley stated that Kansas had elected more women to public office than any other state in the nation. However, the battle still wasn't over. Kansas women could not vote in state and national elections. An unsuccessful campaign was waged in 1894. Again, national suffrage leaders visited Kansas and traveled throughout the state making speeches. One unique illustration used in the 1894 campaign was titled American Woman and Her Political Peers. It was designed by Mrs. Henrietta Briggs Wall of Hutchinson to show the categories of people that had the same legal rights as women: an idiot, a convict, an American Indian, and an insane man. Ms. Frances E. Willard, leader of the National WCTU, was pictured in the center. After that, women did not push for the vote until 1911 and 1912. This time, the women intended to organize the entire state. On December 9, 1910, Mrs. Catherine Hoffman of Enterprise, Kansas, president of the State Suffrage Association, outlined a plan of action for her officers. The officers included Mrs. Lilla Day Monroe, Mrs. W.A. Johnston, wife of a Kansas Supreme Court Justice, and Mrs. W.R. Stubbs, wife of the governor. Governor Stubbs indicated he supported their efforts. On January 13, 1911, a resolution was introduced in the House providing for submitting an equal suffrage amendment to Kansas. The association's legislative committee advocated for suffrage at all social events held for the wives of members of the legislature. Lillian Mitchner, president of the state WCTU, added the support of that organization. The amendment resolution passed both houses and was signed by Governor Stubbs on February 9th. The vote would occur in the general election of 1912. Mrs. W.A. Johnston, Lucy Brown, was elected president of the Kansas Equal Suffrage Association on May of 1911. On July 10th, she submitted a plan for organizing the entire state. The state was divided into 8 districts, and each district president was to help organize each county. County officers were to keep in touch with every precinct. Lucy B. Johnston focused on organization, education, and publicity. The membership committee intended to enroll every woman in Kansas, either as a dues-paying member, as a sympathizer, or as opposed to the cause. The education committee distributed literature stating the case of women's suffrage. This case for women's suffrage sought the endorsement of the amendment by educational institutions and sponsored essay contests in public schools. Fundraising was difficult, as most women did not have access to large sums of cash. State board members pledged from $25 to $200. Local groups held food sales, ice cream socials, and suffrage teas. Some women sold fancy work. The Russell County Suffrage Association held a dinner on one day of their Chautauqua. They made $35 and boasted that William Jennings Bryan ate with them. One of the more profitable ideas was the sale of balloons. They were bright orange, about 2 feet in circumference, and said "Votes for Women" or "Votes for Mother." They were sold at picnics, fairs, parades, parties, and other gatherings. June 29, 1912 was declared Balloon Day. $500 was raised and given to the state headquarters. By January 1st of 1912, 1/3 of the counties had suffrage organizations, and the state headquarters was now located in the Mills Building in Topeka. Some of the local workers reported disappointing results. Mrs. Ella Brown of Sedgwick County said, "Suffrage is worse than lukewarm here." The 5th District President reported that she had encountered stupendous apathy among the women. Reports from other districts contained similar discouraging news. In April 1912, a men's league for women's suffrage was organized. Mrs. Johnston offered suggestions of how men could help. There are people whom women cannot approach and places where women do not congregate. And in these places, you could be of valuable service. That is, in barbershops, hotel lobbies, all kinds of shops, on the streets, and at public meetings for men. These are most excellent places where an opportunity could be seized to talk for votes for women's suffrage. We are depending largely upon our men friends and their chivalry to help us in this effort we are making to help American women. Jane Addams of the Hull House in Chicago toured the state promoting suffrage in May. She arrived in Kansas City on May 6th. A parade of 200 decorated cars escorted her to the armor packing plant, where she addressed a crowd of 1,000 workers. She spoke at the Bower Sox Theater in Lawrence and at the State Suffrage Convention in Wichita, where she addressed a crowd of over 1,400. Adams also gave speeches in Wellington, Winfield, Ark City, Pittsburgh, and Girard. Beginning in June, the campaign blanketed the state with events of all kinds and took advantages of crowds attending other special events such as Chautauquas, county fairs, Old Settlers reunions, and teachers' institutes. The women planned picnics, parades, concerts, and rallies. Accounts of these events all across the state were documented by local newspapers. Many women worked tirelessly for the suffrage cause. Martha Farnsworth, a Topeka resident and wife of a mailman, was an example of one of the workers in the trenches. She recorded her efforts in her diary. In 1905, she was elected to membership in the Good Government Club, a women's organization that focused on a number of civic issues, including suffrage. A women's suffrage amendment was on the ballot in 1912, and the Good Government Club was involved in promoting its passage. Martha hosted a meeting of the club at her home, which included a number of lukewarm suffragists. She wrote that it was just the kind they wanted to come so that they could benefit them to support the suffrage. The Good Government Club worked tirelessly to drum up support for the vote, including distributing flyers offering suggestions for action. On Saturday, October 26th, Martha participated in a suffrage parade. She rode in the Clevenger car with Mrs. Clevenger, Mrs. Lola Day Monroe, and 2 other women. The parade was led by a car owned by Governor Stubbs. The Knights and Ladies Band led the parade. At the auditorium, Reverend Anna Shaw, one of the national suffrage leaders, gave an address. Martha noted that there was a big crowd. Martha continued her work for state suffrage. October 27th, at 2:30, walked out to Central Park to have the business meeting of the board of the Good Government Club. Got home at 7 o'clock. We women certainly are working ourselves to death, whether we get the ballot or not. The Good Government Club prepared a suffrage section for the Topeka Daily Capital on Sunday, October 27th of 1912, just a couple of weeks before the election. Martha drew some cartoons that were used in the paper, as well as helping sell advertising. November 1st, I had to go to our Good Government headquarters and help Mrs. Rodebush get out 730 campaign letters. November 2nd, I worked hard all day. Had to neglect the house a little to address 230 campaign letters to send out in our suffrage cause. November 4th, at 1 o'clock at the YMCA to stand in line for the Good Government Club Tea Party. A suffrage affair, of course, and we had an immense crowd. About 2,000 called between 2 and 6 o'clock, and tonight closes the campaign. Election day in 1912 was on November 5th, and Martha worked at one of the polling places in the 6th Ward. Hurried away to the polls for its election day, and we women are to make our last stand for our enfranchisement. I was at the polling place before daylight, handing out cards. Martha worked the polls until noon. Martha's entry for November 6th reported a successful result. Though she was using terms of her time, her reference to Hispanics is not politically correct by today's standards. This is the day after, and so bright and sunny. A glorious day when there is sunshine in my heart. But while I went to bed last night a slave, I woke this morning a free woman. My vote counts as much as any Negro's, as any Dago's. Oh, it is glorious. Suffrage won in Kansas by a 50,000 vote majority. And the papers say it won in Michigan, Oregon, and Arizona, only losing in Wisconsin. Thursday, October 7th, 100 or 2 of we women gathered at Mrs. Monroe's to celebrate our victory. With a man with a drum to lead us, we paraded around the State House with our lanterns and Votes for Women pennants, then back to Mrs. Monroe's, where we had a few short speeches, sang praise God from whom all blessings flow, and were served coffee and wafers. The efforts of the women and men that conducted the statewide campaign were pretty amazing. They created an effective organization, had prominent women involved in the effort, and used all means of publicity available to them. They even embraced the relatively new mode of transportation, the automobile, in reaching the public. But probably somewhat anticlimactic, 2 years after the successful campaign in 1912, Martha got to vote on August 4 of 1914. Hot all day, and election day primary. I walked down to the Hartsett voting precinct and cast my first state vote. In conclusion, the fight to secure full voting rights for women in Kansas took over 50 years. However, it preceded the adoption of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution by 8 years. As we all know, the achievement of voting rights did not ensure that women had equal rights or that they were able to participate in education, work, etc. in the same manner as men. There are still gender inequities in our country and the world, so the battle continues. However, the people discussed in this talk have to be commended for their perseverance, foresightedness, and ultimate success in securing women's suffrage in Kansas.
Wow, we've come a long ways, haven't we? Pat, we, instead of giving a pencil or a pen or a cup of coffee, we have our speakers endorse a book for children at Ross Elementary School. So I ask you to sign for that. Next week, we meet at the Manor Conference Center in the Sunflower Room, and our own Vince Fry. Is Vince still here? Stand up.
Hi, Ben.
He will be sharing with us activities that are happening in downtown Topeka, so we'll look forward to hearing from him. And with that, shall we say the four-way test?
It's true, it's fair and all concerned.